Hello class and welcome to session 12. You can see we have another guest today, Paula Goldstein, who is the CEO of JFCS Philadelphia. So I would like to start by having Paula give you a brief review, an overview of JFCS, and then we're going to proceed with our interview today, which is on the leader's role in honchoing, leading, managing the strategic planning process. Hi, Paula.
Hi, Harriet. So nice to see you. Hi, everybody. Nice to be here. Jewish Family and Children's Service has been in existence for 157, almost 158 years. It started as the children's part of the agency, Association for Jewish Children, started as a boarding home and foster care agency that took in Jewish children who were orphans in the city of Philadelphia. And around 1985, Jewish Family Service and Association for Jewish Children merged to become Jewish Family and Children's Service. Today, Jewish Family and Children's Service is an $11 million organization. We serve approximately 25,000 people a year through 6 main program areas, and they are adoption, what we call our Open Arms Adoption Program, which is a full-service domestic adoption program. Our Child Welfare Program, which is a program that has a contract with the City of Philadelphia to work with foster children, family reunification, and teaching people parenting skills. Our Education and Outreach Program, which is a prevention-based program working with over 11,000 school-age and teens each year in areas like drug and alcohol prevention, gambling prevention, suicide prevention, teen pregnancy prevention, and cyberbullying and bullying prevention. We have an Adult Services Program, which works with adults and families. We work with the most chronically poor and mentally ill in the city of Philadelphia to help them with their basic human needs, such as hunger, housing, medical needs, and utility help. We provide case management services and counseling as well. We have a couple of sub-programs. We work with victims of domestic violence. We work with families in terms of family preservation in the Jewish community in a program called Jacob's Ladder. And we do a lot of work also around bereavement and loss. We have a senior services program which works with over 700 seniors each year, and the mission of that program is to keep seniors safe and aging in their home. Of that number, about 300 are Holocaust survivors in the city of Philadelphia, and we receive funds from the Claims Conference in New York, which are dollars that help us to provide home care services, chore, medical expense needs, transportation to Holocaust survivors. And we have a Jewish Community Services Program, which is primarily our chaplaincy program. We serve over 8,000 people a year in hospitals, nursing homes, and other residential facilities where our chaplains go out and visit when people are sick, when people are at the end of life. They're part of the hospice team. And we also work with people in nursing homes and residential to help them celebrate Jewish holidays and other activities to just help them stay connected to the Jewish community. So those are the services that we offer.
I'm exhausted.
Me too.
I know Paula for many years, and I'm delighted that she's agreed to do this. I have known JFCS before the merger, when AJC, the Association for Jewish Children, operated, because I was a child care social worker during those days. And then I know JFCS and have done work with them both in management and leadership training and in strategic planning. So it's very impressive in this economy that you have expanded so well and have and continue to provide such wonderful services.
Thank you.
And by the way, congratulations to Paula. I think you have just completed your first year as CEO, and so we were pushing for her all that time.
Thank you, Harriet.
Okay, I'm going to start by reading a statement, and I've asked Paula to respond to it. It's about leadership. I did not write this statement, but I found it and thought it really said what I would like to say. Leadership in nonprofit organizations is different from analogous positions in business or the public sector. The difference is shaped in large part by a couple of distinct characteristics of organizations in the nonprofit sector. Shared responsibility for and control of resources with volunteers, and heavy reliance on the efficacy of mission to engage a diverse set of stakeholders for whom there is no direct or tangible benefit. So I think we can all relate to that, being in Jewish organizations, the volunteers, and the mission that really drives the organization, by which the stakeholders only have this intrinsic benefit, no bottom line benefit. As such, the most successful leaders in the nonprofit sector will connect emotionally with supporters, convince followers to forsake their own personal self-interest for altruistic motives, and inspire confidence in pursuit of significant organizational change. Nonprofit CEOs must also exhibit the best traits of prudent resource management, as well as lofty, inspired leadership. Wow.
Wow, that's right.
How much do you agree with this statement, and can you give me a few examples of how you see it working at JFCS?
Well, I really agree with the statement. I must tell you that I read it over many times, but I think that in a very lovely way, it captures a couple of key dynamics for somebody in the leadership role of a nonprofit. There's the issue of responsibility of the CEO internally and externally, and I think this speaks very nicely to that by talking about how you make those connections to your stakeholders, and how you are always trying to reach for an emotional connection, so that they develop a passion for your cause and for your organization. So I was inspired by that, but it also speaks very eloquently to the need in a nonprofit to always balance having a business sense in terms of the way that you run the organization, and I think they spoke to that in terms of prudent resource management, but also being able to couple that with an understanding of how important it is to be an inspiring leader, that you are selling your product, to sound very businesslike, but you're doing it with a set of skills that really draws on passion, emotion, and what energizes other people. And you're also trying to reach towards them in terms of what their own life has been like, and what are those significant things that have happened to them that help them to connect to how you help other people in your organization. What are those common bonds, and what do they want to see when they talk about altruism? What do they want the world to be like? And what do they want to see your organization doing to make the world better? So I actually thought that it was wonderful when I try and make that connection with our stakeholders in the community, whether it's a donor, or I like to refer to them really as an investor, somebody who's really who wants to see and make a long-term investment in the organization. I like to approach them in a way that tells our story, or tells a story of somebody who's received our help, or tells a story about any life crisis that a person can find themselves in need of help in, and then help them make the connection. So I find that I'm frequently telling stories, but my strategy, and this is the business part of it, is I don't just decide I'm going to tell stories. I have to have a strategy behind it. And the strategy is I want to make that emotional connection with them. Sometimes I have to tell a lot of stories because it's not necessarily the first one that strikes a chord with them. but it's the constant balancing of how do I think in a business sense about this organization and the needs of the organization, and how do I get out in the community and really convey the good work and the passion that I feel about the work that we do.
And you're here how many years now?
And I'm here 28 years.
Nah.
Pretty unbelievable.
Really?
And have been in many different positions. So I like to say to people that I work with today that the one thing you can't tell me is that I don't know what we do. And sometimes I have to say that people really feel that CEOs don't know, or they don't understand what the organization is all about. So I'm definitely a lifer. I live and breathe it, and I'm proud of that.
Terrific. Thank you. So now you have a new few paragraphs to relate to and use any way you want. When I found this in a book, I thought this just said it all. Let's talk about the fact that this is your first strategic plan as CEO. I was involved, at least 15 years ago. I think that's when I first met you. And so you have something to relate to. What specifically have you done now as the CEO that was different than any of your other roles to involve the board and the staff along the way? And I know you're just at the beginning stages. So what have you done so far? What are your first steps?
So it is quite a process, I will tell you that. And I will tell you that the very first thing that I did prior to involving anyone in the process was I took several months to review our last strategic plan and then give myself time as the CEO of the organization to really think about what my vision is for the strategic planning process. Because I knew that I would have to have a very clear understanding of what I think the organization needs are and what directions we need to be going in. Whether they ultimately are or not in every way is probably not going to be the case, but I needed to have a direction that I wanted to see us go in to be able to sustain the organization. So before I did anything, I really took a couple of months to think long and hard about what my own vision was. Then I engaged a committee of a couple of staff, not a large committee, but of 2 staff and 2 board members to participate with me in a process of interviewing consultants for a strategic plan. I picked the consultants and brought them to the table for the interview, and we interviewed 6 different consultants. I deliberately brought together consultants who had very different approaches to strategic planning, so that our board and our staff could have that exposure in terms of thinking through who would be the best in making this happen. But I was very clear with them prior to us even getting started with the consultants that I felt that this strategic plan was a big picture strategic plan, and I was less interested in getting into the minutia of goal setting around specific service categories per program, and I was really focused on some very, very big issues like talent acquisition. Who do we need to be hiring in this social service agency for the future, and why? How is technology going to interface with everything that we do, and where are we missing the boat? What are we doing and not doing in terms of engaging new leaders? And how do we convert our current donors into investors, which is the new terminology in terms of nonprofits? And what do we need to be doing to be a relevant family service agency for the future? We know why we came into business. That need no longer exists. And so where do we need to be headed to have people make the connection with us as a family service agency. So I had a very different idea about this. And I conveyed that to the committee, and from there we went on to make a selection in terms of the consultants. So that took several months, and we finally selected someone. Since that time, I formed a strategic planning committee, which is comprised of my executive committee of the board, my executive team, which is my vice president of human resources, vice president of finance, vice president of development, and vice president of program, and a couple additional key board members who have expertise, one of whom was the chief technology officer for the city of Philadelphia. So I was, trying to grab some people who would also pull in other areas of value for us. And that alone took many conversations with people. What is this committee going to do? What's going to be expected of me? What's the time commitment? So it was a conversation with everyone, and until we got that going, that took us into about a month ago. When we reconnected with our consultant, the goal was to start the process at the end of October, beginning of November. We're on target for that. And we now have our first project launch date set for November 12th, when we're pulling everyone together to frame the process. So that's what's been done to date.
When you say you're pulling everyone together, who do you mean?
The entire strategic planning committee.
Okay. And how well informed is the rest of the staff and board about the process?
Good question. So my vice president of programs had a long conversation with all of our program directors this week about the strategic planning process, and I intend to be at the next meeting of our program directors. Those are the individuals that are running our programs, to talk to them about some of my hopes for the project. In addition, I have communicated to the board about this since last year. When I started to think about strategic planning, it was on every board agenda in a little fashion, but just to continue to keep people charged about moving into this year. And we had, it certainly was on our agenda for this past meeting we had in September, and I have a board meeting tomorrow where I'm dedicating a lot of time to how the board can have a voice in the process.
Great, great. You began this conversation by saying that you took a lot of time to think through for yourself what your vision is, and you read the last strategic plan. How many years ago was that?
That was 3 years ago.
Okay, so can you recall how often there's been a strategic plan?
It has been every 3 to 4 years.
Okay, all right. So over the last dozen or so years, there's 3 or 4 plans.
Correct.
Okay. Are they very different?
They are, and I have been a part of several of them. I think the last strategic plan we had reflected the interests of the former CEO, and that was to bring JFCS into a business mode, to help us to conduct ourselves in a more business-like way, to set goals for our programs in a business-like way, and to think also about how we might cultivate some revenue, fee-for-service revenue.
Okay, so that leads me to my next question, which is leading the process now, not just being a part of it. How different is your approach from your predecessors?
It's an interesting question, and I actually think it's the most interesting question you've asked. I think that my approach is different, but naturally we're all different people, and so we come to it differently. We're also advised differently by others on our board and staff in terms of what the needs are. But I do think the most pressing difference is what the needs of the organization are at the time that the strategic plan is being completed. And that drives the type of strategic plan that you're looking for. It just so happens that JFCS is facing a challenge in terms of our child welfare business. We probably are going to be out of the business of child welfare in the next couple of years, because we will not be receiving a large contract to be a lead agency in the city of Philadelphia in their child welfare restructure. And it's not, this is a decision that we've made not to do that. But that's a huge source of revenue for our organization, and it's also a huge way that we serve children. Mm-hmm. So that is something that has just not happened over the past 25 years here at JFCS. And so because of that, because it's such a significant change, we have to look at what we want to be in terms of a family service agency and children's services and how we might be able to plug that hole moving forward. So having somebody come in who's able to address big picture questions was incredibly important to me. If you're reading up on some of the current dilemmas that nonprofits are facing, you also know that government contracting has changed, and that ways that organizations used to be able to recover more than their cost through administrative overhead are no longer going to be in existence. So the discussion of how much do you want to be, or should you go after government contracts, can you afford to be, is a big picture question, and something that drove the type of person that I wanted to bring in to do that. So ultimately, I think what I went with was somebody who was all about innovation and reinvention. And the needs were different at other times in the organization, and I think that is what drove the difference in the process.
Mm-hmm. What about your approach to participation and involvement with your internals, with your staff and your board? Has that been pretty consistent over the years?
In terms of the strategic
planning process, yes.
Yes, although my struggle, and it's always a balance, is making sure that our board is engaged, but also making sure that our program staff and our executive team have key voices in the changes that will occur because of the strategic plan, so that everybody has a level of buy-in that you have to have in order for the strategic plan to be successful. So that's a work in progress, and it will probably continue to be a very fluid process until the end. If there's somebody that we need to engage that we haven't at a certain point, we will. And so I think we always need to be looking at that.
I remember vividly, and I'm not even sure I remember how long ago it was, that I was asked to do an employee survey as part of the strategic planning process. And I remember sitting up in your Northeast office on Bury Road and around the lunchtime, and we would give out the surveys. And people that came, if they completed it, we gave them a movie ticket. Does that ring a bell to you?
I vaguely remember that.
That's got to be 15 years ago at least.
And those were the better days because we don't give movie tickets anymore. So.
Movies are too expensive.
That's true.
Now we can give a Netflix pass.
That's true. That's true.
Okay. You said this in so many words, and everything that we've talked about in class talks about communicating, being visible, being continuous in your message. It's at the core of getting buy-in and acceptance, and is the key leadership quality of a CEO. What are your plans, and how do you think you will vary your approach depending on your staff, your board, and other stakeholders?
For the strategic planning process?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's communication is the role. Managing communication is the primary role, I believe, of a CEO. And it's more than communication, it's strategic communication. There has to be an end goal or purpose for why you're communicating what you're communicating. But I think that in terms of this strategic planning process, the consultant that we've hired has many layers of involvement that he is going to present to engage our staff and our board and key stakeholders in the community in having a voice in this process. And my intention as CEO is to be talking about it on an ongoing basis from the day we begin. So it will be at board meetings, it will be at more informal gatherings, it will be at our staff holiday party. Any opportunity that I have, and it will be through some written communication as well, it always has to be talked about. And what I have found in the last year is that any hot and burning issue is something that I always need to be finding moments to talk about, whether it's a one-on-one, in a small group, in a large group. It's a way of getting people to really embrace something that's really critical and important for the organization. So it always has to be happening, and it has to happen in many different ways, because I have board members who simply don't read emails, okay? And yet if I sit down and have a cup of coffee with them and have a one-on-one conversation, we're good. Other people don't want to take that time, and they say, just send me, something or something written. So we have to do it all.
Right. So it's really individualizing your communication based on who the recipient is,
That's
but
right.
always having an end goal in mind.
That's right.
Okay. What roles do you see your senior leadership team playing in the process and into the implementation stage? Primarily your staff executive team. What roles do you see them? You mentioned that you had them talk to their program directors. What else do you have them doing?
Well, I think that many of the big picture issues for us lie in their area. For instance, we have a structural deficit in this organization. We never have enough cash for what we need in terms of the organization. That means that we have to do better in terms of our development staff, and we have to be approaching people in a different way. So I think that one of the big issues for us is going to be looking at that structural deficit so that when we can all talk about it in a very educated way at the board level, and we can not have to present a budget that happens only one time a year where people go, oh my gosh, you're running this deficit, and there's more of a educated understanding of what's happening. So I see my CFO as being very instrumental in that process. We also have issues of real estate and location coming up. And we have already established a real estate committee of our board, but our CFO oversees that as well. And that's going to be a huge part of what we're talking about moving forward. So that will probably be his thing. In terms of board engagement and creating investors, our VP of development is going to be very much a part of that. And from what I've heard, some of the understanding of how technology can play a role in development moving forward. Should we still be relying on 3 direct mail pieces a year? Or is there more that we can do through Twitter and Facebook and other things that will cost us a lot less money and bring the same level of donation into the organization? So I see her very much, commandeering that area of expertise. My VP of HR is very, very passionate about talent acquisition, and she's talking to our staff about it all the time. How do you assess who you need? And do we need to be an organization filled with social workers moving forward? Or do we need people with business acumen in certain areas or marketing? Is there a combination formula that we should be looking at? So I see her very much driving that process. And of course, my vice president of programs will be the voice ultimately. She has her own vision about our programs and where we should go, but she'll also be the voice of the program directors.
Terrific. That was a nice, broad and yet specific overview of how you see your executive team helping you lead this charge. Anything else you'd like to share?
No, I think that you have really covered it. I think it's a challenging undertaking. I'm very excited about it. And my only hope is that we hear every voice that we need to hear in the community. You really can't, in any way, shape, or form, do strategic planning in a vacuum. And it takes a lot of work to make sure that you have all the players that you need to around the table. So that's my hope, and I know that we're going to be working very hard over the next year to make that happen. And my parting comment will be, as the CEO, I need to have the biggest piece of energy for it. And I am the driver of the process. I have a chair, a board chair. I have others in the mix, but every one of them has something else that's very critical for them to do, like a job. And so they will, their focus will drift. And so I see myself as the chief cook and bottle washer of the strategic planning process when people are taking a bit of a dip and keeping everybody energized so that we can complete it.
So you're the cheerleader too.
I am.
So you just said, just to clarify, this is going to be a year-long process?
About 9 months, 9 to 10 months.
9 to 10 months, which will produce another 3-year plan.
Yes.
Terrific. Well, Paula, I couldn't be more happy and satisfied. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
And
Good
class,
luck.
I think that you will have enjoyed this interview. And we finish the readings, enter the form, and I'll see you next time. Bye now. Have a good week.